Well, good afternoon and welcome to the very last Ready for Her panel. We have a great panel here with us here today. I'm Erin Isfeld. You may know me from CTV Edmonton, but I am also very involved in wanting to make sure that there are so many female voices here on the political landscape in Alberta. We're going to get to know our panelists in just a few moments here, but we want to talk a little bit about the Ministry of the Status of Women. They have been so involved, and of course, Minister Stephanie McLean has been so involved in making sure that more women feel that they can run in this next municipal election. Not only that election, but elections after that, provincial elections, federal elections, that kind of thing. We want to make sure that women are empowered and they know that this is something that they are going to succeed at and that any woman can definitely do that. Let's get to our panel now. This is an esteemed panel. These are very, very powerful women who have done so many awesome things. Right here to my right, we have Lisa Holmes. Of course, you'll recognize her as the mayor of Morinville. Tell us a little bit about your path to get to where you got to.
Oh, well, I was elected in 2010 for the first time when I was 30 years old. We had just moved to Morinville a year prior, so I'd only lived in the community for almost less than a year before I threw my name in the hat. And I just wanted to see a young woman represented on our council. So it was exciting. I won in 2013. I ran again for mayor and won. So it's been a really great and joyful ride.
Okay, Stephanie McLean. Of course, many of you will know Stephanie. She has been in the legislature and has really been a really strong voice for the working mom. You were first elected, obviously, in 2015 and have now taken on this role to ensure that so many more women are getting out there and are running. We see Patrick, he's sort of growing up with you at the legislature. We saw him like on your chest as you're in there in question period, what have you, but you have really taken on that role to make sure that women, whether they have children, whether they don't, they know that they can play an active role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's obviously a really personal thing to me, but I want to make sure that women, no matter what background you're coming from, no matter what your passions are, and no matter what your life circumstances are, that there is a path for you to become a leader in your community, and there is a path for you to become even an elected representative in your community. And so I'm so excited with the Ready for Her series that we've been able to encourage more women already to put their name forward and take that step.
Yeah, we really have seen some incredible inroads as far as women that are running already, and maybe women that are just sort of sitting back right now thinking, I don't know, I'm still on the fence. And so that's why we're going to have some great questions and answers here today about encouraging many of you to get out there and put your name on that ballot. And we have Nav Kaur here with us today. You know, you came sort of into light as far as the political spectrum last fall when you ran for city council here in Edmonton in Ward 12. There was 34 candidates, we might add, in that race. But why was it that you wanted to get involved?
Well, you know, I think I have been doing a lot of community work over the years in Edmonton, and we were sort of sitting around. We had a group of folks that wanted to support. It was the by-election, so we wanted to support the replacement on council, and we just didn't find anyone aligned with our values collectively. And I was seeing that people across many of my communities were feeling the same way, and so we just kind of threw collectively, I would say, our hat in the ring. And for me, I think really the moment was immediately when I had been asked to run, like, now if you were the candidate, like, let's do this. My reaction was, no, women like me don't sit at that table. You know, that was sort of a gut reaction. And almost because of that, knowing we all as a team came together and ran that particular kind of campaign. And I think it was highly successful.
And Catrin Berghoff, you were instrumental in Nav's campaign. You've worked on several campaigns. Maybe describe what you've done for those campaigns and who you've represented.
So I've worked initially on student politics campaigns. Actually, that's where my background is from. And then I moved on to a number of other campaigns, some provincial, but mostly I found my home in the municipal area and worked on Don Iveson's first council campaign just a little bit. Moved away, and when I came back, he ran for mayor, and I helped run the ground game on that election. And then most recently, Nav's campaign.
And it's once you get that initial taste of a campaign, I think that's where it just sparks something, right? You just think this is something phenomenal. I want to be part of that. We have so many opportunities for everybody who is watching online right now to get your questions in. We're going to start a question and answer period now. Just a nice informal discussion about your views, your insights, what you can offer to those who are at home, who are again sitting on that bench and wondering whether this is something for them. And then we'll have plenty of time for any of you who want to sort of show us what type of questions that you want answered. We will make sure that those questions get answered here today. Lisa, let's start with you. Why did you want to start this sort of political professional career? You said you were only in the community of Morinville for a year before that happened.
That's right. I think my biggest motivation was the fact that I went to a town council meeting because I served on the library board, and we were doing a presentation, and when I looked up at the council, I just didn't see myself there. And we wanted to make Morinville our home permanently, and I wanted to make sure that the views of a young family, a young mom, were going to be heard. I had ideas about what kind of children's programming I wanted to see. I already had, I'm very opinionated, so I already had lots of opinions about the playgrounds and the state of things. And
that's a prerequisite, I think, for being a politician. You have to stand by that opinion, right?
Yeah, you have to have some ideas, and I wanted to share those with others, and that was really what got me motivated to put my name forward. I think, like I said before, I didn't expect to win. I just wanted to have a great conversation and put some ideas out there, and I figured someone else would run them and start championing those for me. But then I ended up winning, and I found that politics is a fantastic place to serve and see your ideas come to fruition.
You talk about that you didn't expect to win. And Stephanie, I would assume that many people have to go through perhaps one election and maybe lose that election and be willing to sort of put that name forward again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know for me, I ran in a by-election and I lost. But as you've pointed out, there's something about a campaign. It's addictive. There's so much fun, so high energy, and really, there's just nothing like it. So I knew that I was in again and wanted to do it again, and took the opportunity and the learnings that I had from the election I had lost to be able to really build towards the campaign that I eventually won in 2015.
Now, did you find that those two campaigns were very different because you had that experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest learnings certainly that I had from that was that, being a bit of a known quantity in the community is really, really important. And certainly helps with your success. So, to the women listening, if you're involved in your community, if you're on the PTA, if you're involved as a volunteer with your community association, you might not have had anybody tell you yet, but you've been campaigning.
True enough. If you're involved in your community in the slightest, that means you already sort of have a vested interest into what's going to happen in your community and in your sort of greater city, in your province, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And was that something for you? Like, did someone have to tell you, Nav, yes, you should run, or was it something within yourself that said, yeah, I think I want to do this?
I think it's definitely, in my case, it had to be a merge of both, right? Like I was saying, not seeing myself, I totally relate to that as well, not seeing myself at that table, and then therefore not really understanding how to get to that table even. And then so having a community sort of with experience that can talk about this, but also just as Minister has been speaking, that we're doing a lot of this work already. So I'm an educator, I have an educator background, and for me the campaign experience was about the means, that how much, the volunteer training and how much we were able to talk about our values and our ideas and the kinds of community we want to live in. So for me, it was sort of, there are multiple facets there, right? Yeah.
And don't take that lightly. All of those attributes that you have, know that they're going to help you throughout the campaign. And Catrin, I'm sure you could speak to that as well. You probably get a lot of rookie candidates who really go at this and say, I don't even know where to start. So when you're sort of strategizing a campaign for your candidate, where does someone start?
I think they start with really strong values and actually thinking what those values are. Because talking to people who are interested in running, some of them are really clear on their values, and some of them have never really sat down and thought about, if I have to make a decision that I didn't anticipate, on what basis am I going to make that decision? And if you have those values clear, then answering any questions on the fly is much easier, because you know how you're going to answer them, and you have a touchstone to fall back onto.
Lisa, do you find that too, before you even start your campaign, you have a strategy that you are sort of having to write out and make sure that, you know what, if this comes up, this is what I'm going to go to. If this comes up, you know, it's sort of a game plan, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because I think I've said this before too, that most municipal campaigns on a small scale, like in rural Alberta and small communities, the issues are always the same. And you could pretty well figure them out just by reading another candidate's platform from a previous campaign or election. Things don't change quickly. So talking about more economic development in your community, more children's programming, those are things that always come up. So it is easy to kind of formulate your strategy based on what your own personal values and what your motives are, and have that all laid out ahead of time for sure.
And obviously, Stephanie, this isn't something that you do alone. You have a huge team, a big support system behind you. If someone is looking at doing this, who do they have to get in line? What types of volunteers, what types of support do they need to have for a campaign?
Well, you know, it certainly varies depending on the resources that you have. So the more resources you have, the bigger the team that you can have, but you can certainly do it with a smaller team. To answer a lot of these questions, we put out an online resource, readyforher.ca, to be able to see the exact list of who you might need on your campaign team. But I would say that at the very beginning, when you're just starting out, the one person that you need to make sure you have is someone who is going to go campaigning with you. This person is going to go with you to events, and it can be a number of people certainly, but this person is your buddy who is going to keep you on track, keep you sane, and make sure that you are making an efficient use of your time. And this person certainly would go door knocking with you. So having at least one good buddy up front who is in it to win it just as much as you are, I think is an essential starting point.
And how did you go about finding that, Nav? How did you find that? I guess a lot of people would know that as a campaign manager. If we're going to throw a title around, that's kind of maybe what people might be calling it.
I think a lot of women will be surprised, like anyone who's involved, like you're saying, in their school or any council or anything like that. Once you start asking people about their values and what their ideas are, that's kind of how you start building a team. And I think that's what happened with us, is as we went out and we started asking for that support, which I think is very difficult and that takes practice. But once you start asking and you start putting your values out there, you'll be surprised at how much things start to galvanize and there is momentum in the community. Oftentimes people are also have those same thoughts and want to put their energy somewhere. So if you're able to galvanize that and to really speak to that, I think you'd be surprised as to how much that builds quite quickly. I don't know if that was
Is that your experience as well? If people want to be part of your campaign and they come forward, just sort of, oh, look, everybody wants to help.
Right. Well, especially if you're very clear with your values, right? Like if you know why you're running and the purpose and the vision, I think that people, you know, they see that, they recognize that, and they'll also stand behind you. But if, you know, that takes some time, and when you have your buddy, those closer people, to really suss out some of your points and how you really, when the chips are down, how are you going to decide when you have that team built?
Yeah.
The larger teams kind of.
When you show momentum and you show commitment and you show that you believe in what you're doing, it really creates an energy. And that's really the biggest role of the candidate, is to put that energy, that positivity out there. The person who is really selling the message, evangelizing your message, that you get people that want to follow that kind of leadership, and you find lots of places, including at the door. You know, one of my best volunteers, she was 15 at the time when she first started with me, and I found her right next door to me.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
See, she'll be running in one of these elections. Yeah. Start them young. I like that.
That's right.
You know, and obviously there's some realistic things you have to think about as far as a campaign. Catrin, can you maybe talk a little bit about the financial part of this? Because many candidates, I think, when they go into it, really have no idea what kind of finances they have to have behind them in order to put a campaign together. And of course, it's going to probably vary from rural to a bigger city like Edmonton or Calgary, Red Deer, right?
Okay. Before we get to that, I would like to add a little bit about the team building.
For sure, please do.
One of the things that I find a lot with women who are considering running is because they're taking a risk, and that risk is sometimes greater or seems more insurmountable to women. they're often very worried about having experts on their campaign, people with a lot of experience, people who quote unquote know what they're doing. And I would always advise to get someone who is competent, reliable, and cares will be much more valuable than any supposed expert or political strategist to you, because it's not rocket science to run a campaign. It's hard work, and you have to know some things for sure. You have to know a few people that you might want to call if you have a very tricky question, but go for reliability and commitment over experience anytime, I would say.
You have to trust those people on your
absolutely.
campaign, and that, like you say, someone who knows you personally, that you're going to get that trust from them, maybe versus the expert who has ran 1,500 campaigns already, right?
And we spoke to this a lot just internally and during our campaign, that, you know, there isn't a lot of opportunity for women to capacity build, to build those skills in from the voter level all the way up to the candidate level, because there's all these roles and all these other sort of skills that you need. And when women run, they build teams of women around them, and there's a lot of capacity and team building that gets built in that way. And so I think Catrin is also saying that when women run, we give the women around us the opportunity to run our campaigns as well and build up that capacity to become those experts eventually. But truly, a lot of it is just showing up and really just doing that hard work, because we would always say, like, we don't know how it's going to go until we try, because, like, really oftentimes it's
and we forget about
ground, right?
that capacity building and that mentorship. When you say, you know, that 15-year-old volunteer,
Yeah.
for her, it's never been impossible to see another woman succeed, right? She was 15 when that happened for her. So that is really important. We had some volunteers that were 14, 15, even everyday girls after school, voluntarily. They wanted to be there. It wasn't a parent dragging them in. And it's a really touching moment when we realize again that for them, they'll never have lived in a world where they didn't have the opportunity to go and see a woman that looks like them run for office and be supported by other women. So true.
Yeah, it's nice to make it fun. And I think that's partly what you guys are talking about, because I know in my side, like, our team wasn't very big. It was pretty well just my husband and myself to start, and then a couple of friends. But again, it's a much smaller scale. But we made it fun for moms that wanted to get involved because their values aligned with mine. And so I know the night before the campaign, they did this chalking of the entire community where they wrote sidewalk chalk, Holmes for mayor everywhere. Nice. So all these moms were like dressed in black and singing all night. It was so much fun. And that's all I heard from them is how great of an experience it was. So they had a good political experience, which is also key, because I think if people can start to see politics positively, it'll change the game.
And that is truly it. Seeing politics in that light, where anybody can really play a part in it. Because I think a lot of people, when they see perhaps the political landscape that is around us, maybe predominantly south of us, you know, you worry about the negativity, you worry about being a woman, and you worry about how someone might attack you as a woman, and we've seen that happen here, provincially for sure, of course on city council here in Edmonton. Stephanie, maybe you could talk to that a little bit, how to sort of share with the folks at home how to get past that. It does take a pretty thick skin to do something like this.
Yeah, you know, I think that it was a little bit harder for me to ignore it in the beginning. You know, I would engage with people, but ultimately they're time wasters. These people, regardless of what it is they're trying to pick on you about, if it's your gender, if it's the way that you're dressing, if it's the way you're saying words, it's ultimately their goal to waste your time. And so the second you give them any of your time, they have won.
True.
And so to keep that at the forefront of your mind, I'm not going to let them win, because I'm here to win for me and my team and our values. That's what you need to aim for. And so I am a big fan of the mute button on Twitter. And I think it's important too that, you know, social media, it's definitely become a place where anonymous bullies can go and try and waste your time. And if you have a hard time blocking it out and keeping your eye on the prize, to get other people to help manage your social media, so that you can focus on what's really important.
You know, that sort of brings us to a question that we're getting from one of our viewers online here. They're saying, I'm running because I'm passionate about my community, and it's easy to talk about that, but it's hard to talk about myself. How can I make a pitch about myself while door knocking. We're pretty humble people most of the time as women, right? So how do we put ourselves out there?
Well, I think that's the biggest piece, is it's a vulnerable state to be in when you're putting yourself out and saying, choose me. And especially if the campaign, like I said, is the values are there, but the issues are very similar with all the candidates. You are really asking them to choose you as a person. And so I just made it as authentic as I could be. Don't try to be someone you're not. Be yourself. That's the easiest thing, because if you try to make up this persona you think the community wants, it won't last very long. So being authentic, I think, is key, and having that support network of people around you too. So if something negative does happen, they're there to rally you, which is always needed. You need to be supported and motivated every single step of the way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The word authentic, I think, really resonates. And that, for me, has been one of the highest compliments that anybody could give me. And some of my team have said, I got involved with you because you're really authentic. And it's that connection. There's a ton of literature on how to win people over in a very quick period of time. And I think one of the points that maintains always at the top of that list is making people feel good about themselves. And the more that you can do that and try and have an authentic connection with somebody in a short period of time where they walk away from it feeling good about themselves, they'll remember that, and they'll feel like they know who you are, even if they can't say a single thing about you.
Right, because they've had that personal connection with you, and they felt good about it. They felt there's something about this candidate that I love, that I resonate with.
Yeah,
right?
When I really got on a roll door knocking in the campaign, I would spend almost no time talking about what my credentials were or who I was. I started off spending most of my time talking about, well, I'm a lawyer and and I've lived, I live in the community and this kind of thing. And then eventually that was just cut completely out. And the only time that I would bring any of it up is if somebody asked me or somebody challenged me on my credentials and, you're too young. Well, yes, let me tell you what I've done in my, 29 years, right?
Exactly. And how did you find that at the door?
Yeah, I mean, I speak a couple of languages as well, so you kind of have to cultivate. It totally has to be authentic. That's so true. But it does take some time. So the first time I ever door knocked in my life was for myself, and so that was really an interesting experience. And because we had a team, it was something that we took a lot of time and effort to think about. And I had people around me to say, Nav, that's actually just, I know you feel comfortable saying this sentence, but maybe it's not, you're stuttering or it's not coming out clearly, or, and so I had people around me to be that sounding board as well, just to ensure that, I am being true to myself, because it does get exhausting. It doesn't last very long if you have a script, for example. There's quite a few funny stories as well, but I think one of the best, because there were 34 candidates and like everyone and their cousin was running in their neighborhood there, and kind of have to joke about that as well. So it was definitely that authentic connection and being heard, I think, in my experience. But I remember one of the best one of the most touching moments on the door for me was a young man opened the door and he's like, you know what? It's a gong show. There's 3 or 4 people. Don't bother. Don't waste your time. Just go to the next door. And I was like, no, I want to tell you why I'm here. I want to tell you I'm going to every single door in your neighborhood. Even if you're not going to vote, I still want to meet you. I want to earn your support, kind of thing. And he so I go off and I'm going and I'm like really excited. And he interrupts me and he stops me and he's like, both of my parents are deaf and I'm fluent in ASL, and I'm telling you that you are the most authentic person, and I'm going to go out and I will vote just for you, just because you really. And so arguably people would be like, oh, he already said he's not voting, just move on, it's a waste of your time. But truly, if you're really there and sort of connecting, keeping that there. So anyway, I agree with both.
Earn that vote, right?
Yeah, like, and that keeps you going. So that moment really kept me going too, right? Is you never know, you don't. So everyone is worth it as well, and trusting your instinct in that way. Yeah.
Catrin, we're talking about door knocking, so maybe we should talk about when does this even start in a campaign, and what are the best times even to be out there in the community door knocking?
Well, in general, you want to catch people when they're home. I mean,
of course,
that's really, and mostly, I think weekday evenings are probably the prime time Weekends can be good, but they can be tough depending on the weather and when the election is. The weather is really nice, no one's going to be home. So we go out on a Saturday and we think we're going to get a lot of people. That's not necessarily true, but definitely weekday evenings. In terms of door knocking, the really sort of campaign literature, hard election mode door knocking doesn't tend to start at the earliest, I would say 8 weeks before a municipal election, in my experience, because people just aren't tuned in.
Right.
Especially it's the end of summer, the municipal elections are, in the fall, so they're not really there yet. They haven't paid attention. They're very confused if you knock on their doors. That said, a lot of candidates do choose to go some up to 2 years before and go around in their neighborhoods and talk to people and get to know them and say that they're considering running, and just get their name out there, especially if they don't already have some sort of name recognition in the community. So there is really no time that is too early to start.
We'll go back to one of our questions online here. And we sort of touched on, and maybe didn't answer it yet, but how much does it cost to run a successful campaign? How much should I plan for? Is it different for rural and urban, and different when you're running against an incumbent? These are all extremely good questions. Lisa, do you want to sort of kick that off as far as the rural perspective?
Oh, absolutely. It is so different between rural and urban. I mean, nothing I can compare. My first campaign, I self-funded. And it cost me, I think my signs were about $600, and I did some photocopying. So it was very minimal.
Right.
But again, it's different. People don't announce that they're running until nomination day, usually in a small town. And you really only get that nomination period to be able to campaign. And so I was able to hit every single house myself and go to all the meetings. It's a little different that way. So, but I think the world is changing. You need to have social media, you need to have ads. So I say probably in a rural setting, you probably need about $1,000, $2,000, which you can probably grab from your friends and family. So it's fairly easy, but
that could be done in a barbecue, right? You can grab that at a barbecue.
Yeah.
Of course, for you running for provincial politics, and for you, Nav, obviously here in the city, you know, it's a little bit different. Do you want to go first here?
Sure.
Nav? Sure.
So when we started out, we had $12,000 in the bank. And it looked like a lot more money than it was. And, you know, I know that the competitor who had the biggest spend in my area spent about $75,000. And at the end of the day, I still look at the differences between our campaigns and I go, I don't know what they had that we didn't other than t-shirts.
Right.
And and so, you know, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't spend it wisely, it's not going to help you out a whole lot. And the thing that I always come back to is remembering that you're not running to be president. You're not, when you're running to be mayor, I'm sure that's even different, right? Because you need a wider spread message. But when you're running for a section within a city, you need to be very targeted. And so being on Twitter, being on Facebook, you're going to catch so many people, maybe 2 of them are going to be from your community. So when you look at how to spend your money, you need to spend it locally, and you need to spend it on the things that are going to be have very strong local effects. And so we made decisions on that basis, and we looked like we had a $70,000 campaign, but certainly more money came in, but and we ended up spending more than the 12. But it even from the very beginning, we looked much larger than we were.
And it's worth noting, and I don't know how it is provincially, but you can go on the City of Edmonton website and you can see what the incumbents, what all of the candidates have spent on their campaign. That's free information for everybody to know. So you can maybe gauge how much money you should be spending, and like this person is asking, like, what is that incumbent spending already? And but not to sort of panic about that, right? Now, do you mind disclosing that maybe like what you spent and how that was used, how that money is used?
Yeah, well, again, our campaign was, I think, in total about 8 weeks long. I want to say about 7 weeks. And it was over Christmas. So we had, over Christmas, I decided, because we did our research, and we're not being represented, or I'm not being represented here. So I think in total we had about 6 weeks. So we had zero name recognition, $0, a couple of awesome women, and myself, and a good attitude, I feel.
Yeah.
But so that was one of the first conversations we had as a team, and so we sat down and we're like, okay, what does it take to run? What kind of campaign do we want to run? what kind of materials do we want? And as a candidate, so I can speak from the candidate's perspective, as someone who's expected to fundraise that, I realize that that's really the amount of money that you ask for, it's all for your team, right? So that was sort of the mentality I went in. We fundraised just, I think, around 47,000.
Yes, yeah.
47,000 in about under 7 weeks. I put in 4,000 initially for space, and we actually did fundraise enough that everybody got reimbursed. I got reimbursed and all of that. So everything was fundraised, and so in terms of not only the team and understanding that dynamic and how to run the campaign, but also recognizing the fundraisers and how people have different levels of capacity. So their time or treasure, you have to ask for both, and some people can only contribute some money. And culturally speaking, I come from the Punjabi community, and that's very difficult to ask for money. People are, for a woman as well, there's other kinds of politics involved. And so that's also important to note, and maybe some of those struggles. But it is difficult to ask for money, and yeah.
And especially if you, and this is a great question here. Other ways you can fundraise if you don't know someone, or a lot of people with the deep pockets, right? Like, it's one thing if you have those connections in our community, people who give to campaigns all the time, but if you don't know those people, Catrin, how do you fundraise? What do you do?
Well, I would say don't let that scare you off, because we did not have any particular people in mind or any particular, easy, rich marks that we were.
This is what I'm saying.
We just came up with a strategy after, and like Nav said before, if you have your values and your values are clear, and people are out there looking for people to support. I think people are becoming more aware of the political arena in terms of women, but also just in general, people are paying attention more, I feel, than maybe they did 5 or 10 years ago. So if you make it clear that your values align with theirs, and that once you are elected, hopefully you will follow through and push in the right direction, people will support you. And then you just have to ask.
You have to ask, right?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that too. When you're campaigning, everyone you meet, you should be asking them for something, either information, time, or money, and in best case scenario, all three. Yes. So as a candidate, that should be your goal, is that you never leave a conversation with somebody without asking for something. And that will not only get you gains, but it will habituate you to doing that. And so it will become more comfortable the more you do it. It starts off very uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the more second nature it becomes. So
and the person who's with you, the buddy, the person who's with you, can be a good person to keep you on track for that. Because sometimes when you're engaging really authentically and you're having a deep discussion, you're taking maybe way too long with one person, or you forget to ask because you're just connecting with someone. That's the person who's always sort of on the ball, and who's like
keeping you on track.
And I found that when I was shy at the beginning too, it was that person who would do the ask for me, because sometimes I would be so ingrained in the conversation I would forget, but I'd also be shy to do it. So they'd be like, no, you need to give Lisa $20. She needs to buy wine. Like, they would be really pushy about it, but it got me through the first couple. And also having a donation page on my website was huge, because people would send in donations through that I didn't know. And then I was able to contact them and thank them, but also start a conversation. And I got most of my donations that way.
Can you crowdfund? Is that a no-no in political arenas? Like crowdfunding or like anything like online? I don't know if you're able to do that or not.
The information is there.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a variety of websites like GoFundMe and stuff like that, right? And so, but typically those websites have a take, right? So they skim off the top,
right?
So it sometimes is the fastest way to set it up, but it's not necessarily the best. And depending on the campaign, the level, you may or may not be able to accept donations from certain places, right? Like, so provincially we can't accept outside of the province, so you have to be a little bit more careful with that kind of thing when you're accepting donations online. But an online donation is great. And one place that certainly, one recommendation, I've had this question, well, where do I go find people with deep pockets?
Is there a club? Do they hang out at a certain place?
Well, they do. That's the thing, is that if you go to fundraisers, you meet people at the fundraisers who are already in the habit of giving money. And so, if you buy a ticket to a fundraiser, you should feel free to campaign during the sort of networking portion of it, and you meet people that are already in the habit of giving money, and even better if you're at a fundraiser for a cause that does align with your own belief system and values and what you're campaigning on. So.
And to that, it's a great place to get yourself out there too. Go to as many events, I would assume, as you can in and around your community that are happening, because that's where you're going to find all the people, like so many people at once, right?
I just had a moment that maybe after how Lisa shared that people might be worried for just sort of, it made it very real what happened, 7 weeks and almost $50,000. But I do want to say that, it sort of sounds daunting, just me saying it right now. But I think even asking people for $10, $20, I did, and we spoke about this a little bit earlier about our energy and our time as candidates. And I think that's something that fundraising really, as a candidate for your team, you need to be out on the doors and you need to do the outreach and finding volunteers and folks to bring into your team, but also understanding that there is going to take like a chunk of your time and energy needs to be focused on cultivating the ask, understanding that you do need to fundraise, because it's not just like, it was really difficult for me to say, give me money, because I want to be, but no, I have a full team and we're doing a lot of education work. The campaign's doing a lot of other things as well. So you're asking, take some time to really think about that, and that as an integral component to it. And it does take some time, but yeah, it's yeah.
I also think it's important that we tell people that you can say no to money, and you should, because municipally you can get corporate and union donations still, and you don't have to cash the check. You can return it. You can have a conversation if a developer sends you a check in the mail, which happened to me. You can have a conversation about what else you can do. And one of the ideas that works in smaller communities is that if a developer owns many show homes, you could put your sign on their show homes and no one else can. Things like that may be worth more than their check for $1,000, but you don't have to cash it, and you can cash it right up until nomination or till election day. So if you don't need the money, you don't have to use it. Like, don't feel desperate that you have to have $50,000, so you need to take that $5,000. It's totally your ethics and values too.
And I would assume that's really hard when you might have people who want to influence you as the candidate, and then further on as the councillor or the mayor. Maybe, not necessarily just developers, but anybody in the community that says, hey, well, I gave her $5,000, so I expect X, Y, and Z. Does that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I haven't experienced that.
Well, good. But that is something that you should probably be looking out for, right?
I think it happens, but to me it happens more with the young woman that gave me $10 that says, no, I gave you $10, I want to have a meeting about it. It's less with the big money. But it does happen. People have said it happens. I think being upfront and having those conversations with whoever it is donating to you about what their expectations are is key to it, and being true to yourself. So if there's any red flags, you don't need the money. That's how I look at it.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to some of our viewers here. This question: I feel like I bring more to the table than my gender. How do you find a balance between being the voice for women and sharing all of the other lived experiences that you bring? Example, your business acumen and your volunteer experience, etc. So maybe not just campaigning just on, well, I'm a woman, I represent all of you women, but how do you make that balance happen?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to be said for being a woman doing that work. It's in and of itself, right? You're an example and a model for others. You don't have to say anything to be that example. I really experienced this when I had my son as an elected official. I wasn't planning on becoming pregnant. I wasn't planning on having the two go hand in hand, but then they did. And the amount of women and men too that have come up to me and spoke to me and said, what you are doing has meant so much to me and so much to my family, and my friends have had conversations as a result of what you've done here about whose job it is to cook dinner at home. That there's been real world effects as a result of something I did, but I didn't do it as a statement. And so just having that opportunity to say, a young woman who's, from my background, in my community, I'm going to step forward. That says volumes without actually having to be explicit about it, right?
Absolutely.
That's the first stereotype that we're judged on. And it's the
Yes.
easiest for a voter to judge is by gender. So if you are not out there communicating the other traits that you have, then that will be what you get judged on. That'll be what you are as the female candidate. So I think it's mostly the candidate that has to be more communicative, and right away, like as soon as you're out there, that's the first thing you say is, no, I am a great communicator. I, do this, I do that. That will take you into a next level, I think, with people. But we do hear that. And we also hear that by promoting yourself as a woman, you're actually weakening the stance that women have generally by saying that there's something that you have to make up for, that there's this lack of women out there, so you have to be the token candidate to get yourself out there. That's not the case anymore. There is quite a few women in municipal politics, and I think we're getting stronger and louder, and you don't have to be the torchbearer. I think enough of us are there already. So,
and you bring up a really good point. And Catrin, I want to ask you this because you strategize campaigns. I've heard a lot of women sort of say, how do I want my campaign to look? Do I want to have my husband or my partner and my children on my campaign? Do I want them door knocking with me? Do I want them on the website? Do I want them on the piece of the pamphlet that I'm leaving at the door? Do you, I guess you just have to sort of decide for yourself who as a candidate you are.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think you think about who you are, what is important to you, where are your values, and then what kind of images or aspects of who you are, because you're never going to represent all of who you are, right? Everyone's very multifaceted, and you have to decide, what do I want to emphasize and what do I not want to emphasize? And then you just pick what aligns with the things that are most important. And also, frankly, the things that will resonate most with the voters in that area.
It's funny too, like you have to be careful about the wording that you choose to be able to convey that message. So for example, when I was running for the nomination, we put on flyers that I live in Varsity with my family. Well, I'm a young woman, so people would ask me, oh, so you live with your parents. But that was not what I was trying to convey,
right.
But, I was cognizant of the fact that I'm in a heterosexual relationship, and, I didn't want to necessarily tout that as the message of, the only person that can be elected is a married woman, married to a man, and so that's part of the reason I chose to put the word family on there. But then it, I got backlash. So you live with your parents. No, yeah.
So you quickly find out those things that you should have maybe thought, like, that you did naively. You're like, oh, well, that's just what I want to be portrayed as.
Yeah,
but then it kind of comes back.
At the end of the day, your family is part of who you are, and people want to know who you are.
Right. That's the authentic part of what we were talking about.
And, as a Calgarian, I've certainly, we've seen that with Mayor Nenshi. Like, there's tons of, questions and conversations about his personal life, and, he's constantly being interviewed about it, and so, you do have to be prepared to answer those questions. Maybe you don't want your child on your campaign literature for, safety reasons or what have you, but at the end of the day, having a child on your campaign literature might say, children,
visually
are a high priority for my platform. So
yeah, you have to know your audience, right?
Exactly.
And this one, I think, Lisa, is for you, obviously. I'm thinking of running for council in my rural town. Grew up here, heavily involved in my community. How do you campaign to people that you've known your entire life?
Yes.
How tough is that?
It is. It's hard. I mean, when I first moved to Morinville, I didn't really know anyone. But the next time I ran for mayor, I knew half the town or more. And it is tough because you are in a bit of a fishbowl, is what we call it when you're in a small town. It's a lot of times it's smaller than a ward in Edmonton, and the people, you can't hide from them. You shop at the same grocery store, and get gas in the same gas station. So I think being authentic to who you are, they know you, they know who you are. So you have to make sure that you're authentic, like we've been talking about, but also trying to just tell them you want to better yourself. I think people that know you want you to succeed, and they want you to grow as a person. And if you explain your personal reasons why you want to be elected, which may be different than, the focus on your campaign platform, that will resonate more with the people that care about you. And that's what I found anyways, is that when I talked about, wanting to get into politics because I love public service, but also the fact that I went to school for political science, this was a really great next step for me. I wanted to learn about public speaking. That meant a lot to some of these people in town. So I think that's a big part. But, overall, I think you just can't be scared of the people. They're all there to champion, and if they're not, you have 4 years to totally make their lives horrible. If you win and they haven't supported you, trust me, I've been in that situation where it's so embarrassing for them, not for you, in the long run. So,
and then maybe you change that perspective over the 4
you do,
years, right?
absolutely.
They sit back and go, oh, look, she is doing a really good job.
Motivator to get it going, for sure.
Okay, one question here, again, from one of our viewers. I have a full-time job. Many people do. How much time should I dedicate to campaigning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know, we're in the last stretch here, right? And I will say that certainly the last 4 weeks before the election day, for me it was the first 2 weeks it was every night, and then the last 2 weeks it was the majority of my afternoon and every night. And I actually did have to take some time away from work in the last 2 weeks of the campaign, although I did continue to work throughout the last 2 weeks. Wow. But before that, I would say at least 3 nights a week. So, you know, I would stop work at 5:00 p.m. and in my, you know, suit from, you know, going to court and my heels, I would go immediately to the doors, hit the doors and door knock until 8 p.m. every night. Yeah.
Did you find that too, Nav? Like, did you know you do a lot of community work? Did you have to kind of put that on the back burner a little bit, take a leave of absence?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in grad school actually at the time as well, so I did take a leave. I continued doing some of the research and stuff, but in terms of my days, it was to get on the doors as much as possible, because we had such a short time period and we were starting from that 7 weeks with zero momentum. But in terms of the small town feel, I actually resonated with that question, because I grew up in the neighborhood that I ran in, and again, coming from like a Punjabi background, and like a lot of my community lives in that neighborhood, so I would like door knock on someone's door and be like, oh yeah, like, or there, you know, a mom would answer and be like, oh, I remember when you were in grade 3 and remember you did this thing, and I was like, yes, nod and smile, and, you know. But I think, yeah, people do want to see you succeed, and it is really like, you'd be surprised as to how many connections are built. And so it may seem daunting, or it may seem like awkward or something, but in fact, once you start putting yourself out there again with the values and the purpose of the intention why you're doing this, it all kind of comes together, even in that small town. Yeah, knock on doors and be like, oh, hey, auntie, yeah, I'm going to be your city councilor, but you're still there to earn their support, you know. So you're still kind of wearing that hat.
You can't take that
focus
for
on
granted.
that. Yeah, exactly.
That you're giving your relatives.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit, Catrin, about perhaps the balance between social media and that traditional door knocking, getting out there, you know, stepping up the steps and knocking on that door? What kind of a campaign are people starting to run? Is it a mix of both, or are people sort of tending to go one way or the other?
I think it's very easy to get overly focused on social media, but in the municipal campaign, in our experience, the people who pay attention to the social media are the candidates teams, the media, and then maybe some really big nerds that are really interested in municipal politics. The general public does not pay that much attention, and like we said before, when they do, they're likely not even going to be you. They just enjoy the rabble-rousing online. So I think you need it. I think it's important to have it so people can, even those people can keep track and you can stay in touch. I don't think it can win you a campaign. I think it can lose you a campaign if you do something really silly with it. Right. But I think it's just we need to do this, but it's not going to be the focus of things.
Right, just getting out to people in that community and talking. Believe it or not, just having those conversations with people is so important. That's what people still, you know, you talk about that authentic sort of feel, right? People still want to have that. Yeah. Is there something that you all knew going in, or I guess maybe I should rephrase that, going into your campaign, what was sort of the biggest surprise that you could share with our viewers here? What was the biggest thing that you went, oh, I had no idea this was going to happen, or this is the way it was going to be?
Oh, wow. You hear the silence from all of
us.
The silence is deafening. I would actually say for me that it was the requirement to fundraise. And I didn't want to believe it when people were telling me, you're the best fundraiser. You are going to be the best fundraiser we have. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because even though having run my own business, I would have to get people to pay up on their bills and say, no, my time is valuable and you need to pay your bill, which was hard in and of itself, but it did prime me a little bit to start asking for contributions. But that was a bit of a shock. Like, okay, you need to start making these calls to these people. Here's your list. I wanted to run and hide it.
You can't just delegate someone on your team.
No,
you
I was
are the fundraiser.
And that was my question. Somebody else can't do this.
Yeah.
How about for you now?
Well, I'm just laughing because I had a visceral reaction to your story, because I remember getting handed a list and being like, go sit in that corner now. You're making these calls, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. This is happening for the team. But yeah, that was definitely a shock. I think for me, I was thinking about this question earlier as well. We talk a lot about like you need to have a thick skin with social media. You need to have fundraising. It's gonna be awkward. And what I really learned is like you earn a thick skin. You just like I didn't realize I'm like I can ignore these things, but you have to go through it, and you develop this thick skin comes over time. So to expect yourself to be able to handle all these things, the only way you're going to do that is by doing it, and then you develop that thick skin, and then you know what you can handle, and you know how you do it differently the next time. What worked, what didn't work.
One of those things that you learn is that courage often feels bad. Courage does not feel good, because otherwise you wouldn't need to be courageous to do it. So if you're going to do something brave and put yourself out there, it is going to feel bad. Expect it and welcome it, because it means you're doing something.
It's a risk. Right? You got to be willing to take that risk and to do those things.
And not just you, but I think my biggest surprise was how it impacted my family and my friends. Just that, like, I made the choice myself. My boys were 2 and 6, and they were little, and I didn't anticipate that it would really matter to them. But they got caught up in the excitement of everything, and we had included them as part of it. And my oldest son that was 6, he was crying on election day because he was so nervous and scared for me. And it was really sweet, but I didn't anticipate, especially like the second time when they were older and they understood how emotionally invested they were in my success. And that expanded to, my parents and best friends and people like that. It starts to be a lot of pressure on yourself once you realize all these people, like, it'll matter to them what happens. And so I wish I would have known that earlier. So I was able to deal with it in a different way and be, especially with my kids, and be more upfront about it. Because you can run with little kids. I did it successfully, and it's been a great adventure for them. But you have to have a lot of communication about what if I don't win, the world's not going to end tomorrow, Mom. It's not going to be rejected. Like, it'll be fine. So that was my biggest one.
Yeah,
Great perspective.
Looking back, I would have gotten someone that would have been my dog handler. I mean, I didn't have any children, but I had 2 small, anxious little dogs, and both of them I had to bring to the vet over the course of my campaign at a different time for dehydration, because they were so stressed out. They weren't eating, they were drinking, and I didn't even know. Yeah. So even your fur babies, like, it affects everyone.
That actually takes us perfectly to the next question from one of our viewers, and I've often thought about this too. Once you're elected, what are your hours like? Are you expected to go to events every evening and weekend? And how do you balance family life with your public life? $100 million question.
No, it's extremely varied. There's a term that's thrown around sometimes: hurry up and wait. There's go moments, and then there's moments where you've got nothing to do, and it takes a little while in those moments where you've got nothing to do to actually make good use of that time for yourself, like going to the gym and self-care. Right. But definitely in the beginning you're thinking, oh, what I'm missing something. I should be doing something right now, but it's not every night, and you very much are in control of your schedule. You can accept as much or as little as you want to, or you have the capacity for. And I find that you can certainly even bring friends to events with you, right? Like that was one really good tip that I'd heard. You might start to feel like you're losing connection with friends. You can use that extra ticket to bring them to an event with you. It's to you, it's a lot like work, but for them it might be a fun night out that they wouldn't normally get. So,
I remember there was a +1, like, oh yeah, sure, now you're +1. I'm like, oh, I can have okay, yeah, I'll like bring friends with me and they can enjoy it. Yeah, like especially when you're in a candidate mode, there's that sort of layer. So after my campaign, it was like meeting a couple of hundred people every day for 8 weeks, and then it's like, okay, go back to doing your own thing again. And it takes some time also to come back, and then you're new and you're different. You've learned all these new skills, and you can take that in my experience, back into what I was already doing to build there. So,
but honestly, I would say to any woman who wants to run to not dwell too much and not think too much about what life is going to be like on the other side of it. I remember saying to one of our campaign managers who was doing a broader campaign management, I love being in campaigns. I don't know what it's like on the other side. I don't even know if I'm going to like it. I love campaigns though. And he's like, you'll find, And one thing I didn't even consider, although it's so blatantly obvious, was that as somebody living in Calgary, that I would have to travel a heck of a lot. That I would have to be in Edmonton a significant period of my time. But it's one of those things that honestly, you're better off figuring it out as you go, and it's different for everyone, and how you figure it out is different for everyone and every family and every situation. And so it's one of those things where you just have to close your eyes and jump. and know that you have the skills and the competence and the abilities as a mom multitasking, or as a professional, or as someone who's gone through adversity. You have the skills already to figure it out when you get there.
Yes, and to ask for help. A lot of asking for help is
one of
huge.
the skills.
Yeah, because I know I really didn't anticipate it either, and I've lived a counselor life and a mayor, and they're both different. But in a small town, most people that run that are over a certain age have another job. So I was working, I was a mom, and then I also got elected to council. And the meetings are usually in the evening, but when there's committee assignments, just be upfront. I say I had little kids. I couldn't take certain committees because they met at times that didn't work. So I asked for help a lot. I asked for help from other moms. I can't pick up my son from school. Do you mind helping me out? And people were really great. The village, the village that raises that was a big part of it. But it's not overwhelming. You are able to make it fun. You're able to take your kids, your family to events, and people don't judge you if you have your kids there because they know and they understand. Everyone, I think, whether you're a politician or you're working a different job, they get the work-life balance. It's an issue for everybody.
I can't believe we are running out of time. We could just talk all afternoon, but and let's just have a few more moments here for some just closing remarks. Catrin, what would you like to say to our viewers who are watching online right now?
I think, what would I like to say? I think I want to talk one more time about courage, because I think it is really important to be courageous, and it will cause discomfort. But you'll have so many joyous moments, and through that discomfort, you'll create change. On election day, I think there are 3 things that you want to feel like. You want to feel like you left it all out on the field, like you worked really, really hard. You want to feel like you stuck with your principles and your values. And you'll want to feel like you did something for the community around you, right? And either way, win or lose, if you do those 3 things, it's going to have been worth it. And I think that's really important.
Awesome. Yeah.
Beautifully said. Wow. Yeah, I completely agree with Catrin. I guess for me, I want to talk about the sense of entitlement. For me, it was really difficult to feel like I deserved to run or deserved a spot at that table, or all of those kind of hang-ups that we might have. And so I want to say that you do deserve it, and you are able to take up that space, and you have the skills already. And even though it feels like you're kind of jumping into unknown water, you'll learn as you go through it, developing that thick skin as you're doing these things, that you actually do have the skills and the capacity, and that there's a whole bunch of tools and folks around you that have amazing kinds of talents around you, and campaigns bring that out. And if your campaign can build those kinds of spaces, it's a success. So,
Stephanie.
I just want to take the opportunity to thank all of our partners, and thank you so much for hosting this. Equal Voice, Ask Her. There's great organizations out there that are encouraging women to run and supporting them to do that. I'm really proud of the Ready for Her series. This is our last one. And so I want to thank all of our viewers and everyone that's attended one of our in-person tours for participating. that being said, this is part of how we're working to make life better for Albertans, because we want to see more diverse representation on our city councils, on our school board trustees. We want to see diversity of opinion, and that means that we need a diversity of experience and backgrounds. I'd like to point out that we had a premier who was a football player. It doesn't take a doctorate in sociology to be able to become an effective representative of your community, to be a politician. That was one of the main concerns that we've heard from women across the province is, what skills do I need? Am I good enough? Do I deserve to be there? And what metrics by which can I measure that? And your passion is the metric by which to measure that. And so if you are interested, please put your name on the ballot. It's not too late. Run.
And Lisa?
Well, your community needs you. And if you're watching this, that means you're most likely interested in running. So I say do it, absolutely, because we require your vision to make our communities better. It's been the most rewarding job I've ever had. I'm making changes in my job that will impact my boys and the next generation. And there's not many jobs that can do that. So I say that. I also say we are all here to help. There are so many people and organizations that will help you. If you have any questions or comments on Twitter, social media, any of us are reachable. Please ask, because we will help guide you through the process and make sure that you have the best experience you can.
Ladies, this has been an incredible conversation. It's been so enriching to many people at home, I can just well imagine. And it's been a pleasure to sit here and be part of this. And I'll leave everybody maybe with this. This is something that my mom has always said to me when I feel a little bit uneasy about what I'm going to get into. She's always said to me, the worst risk you can ever take is not taking one at all.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that says it all for what you ladies have done and what many of you at home will do from here on out. So get out there. Nominations end September 16th. There you go. The election.
18th.
Election day is October 16th. Nominations close September 18th.
There you go. You still have time.
Yes.
Okay. Happy campaigning, everybody.
Thanks.